All right, let's dive right into this explainer. Today we're tracking the invisible, creeping threats of our planet's systemic collapse. And honestly, it reads exactly like a gripping, dark, psychological thriller. But the really scary part is that the sources we're unpacking today are rooted entirely in cold, hard scientific reports and expert assessments. We're looking at what researchers are calling a silent march.
A silent march to catastrophe. You know, when we picture global threats, our minds usually go straight to those big Hollywood blockbusters, right? A sudden cinematic explosion, a giant meteor hitting the Earth, an overnight deep freeze. But these sources describe our current trajectory as something far more terrifying precisely because it is so quiet. It's this gradual, creeping accumulation of unnoticeable cracks in the very systems that support human civilization. These invisible fractures just build and build in the background, totally unmanaged, until a sudden, devastating break actually happens.
Section 1. The quiet beginning. So this silent march doesn't kick off with a sudden bang. It starts with a slow, creeping, extreme heat that just degrades the foundations of life. Because of this, our food production is literally one of our biggest vulnerabilities. The fragile ecosystems that our entire global economy relies on for basic food security are under immense, crushing stress right now. According to the assessments, we could be looking at complete agricultural collapse in critical regions in just a few short decades. Specifically, they're targeting the years 2030 and 2050. That's not some distant sci-fi future, that is right around the corner.
Section 2. Awakening the methane threat. Let's head up to the Arctic for a second and look at how this heat builds into a truly terrifying loop. Deep down beneath the ice, the permafrost is thawing out, and as it melts, it releases methane. Now get this, methane is at least 28 times more potent than carbon dioxide. Just wrap your head around that multiplier for a second. It's a massive, invisible surge of heat-trapping gas escaping into the atmosphere, and it's happening completely independent of human industry.
And what that means is global warming enters a self-perpetuating catastrophic phase. The warming is no longer just something humans are doing. It basically becomes a self-sustaining planetary machine waking up to work against us. The methane release traps more heat, which melts more permafrost, which releases even more methane. It is the literal definition of a catastrophic loop. And once it's fully awakened, we can't simply flip a switch and turn it off.
Another absolutely critical domino in this thriller is the Greenland ice sheet. For millennia, this massive block of ice has basically acted as a stable weather regulator for us, but the sources are warning that it's currently lurching toward a tipping point collapse. If it crosses that threshold, we aren't just talking about more water in the ocean. We're talking about a complete, devastating disruption of the delicate ocean currents that regulate the entire planet's weather patterns.
But honestly, the sheer volume of that water is the true nightmare scenario here. 1 billion. If that bedrock of ice simply melts, sea levels are going to rise to a point where over 1 billion people living in coastal neighborhoods around the world will be violently displaced. They're going to be forced to abandon their homes, creating a global migration crisis unlike anything we have ever seen.
Section 3. Cascading tipping points.
You see, these individual failures don't just happen in isolation. They trigger chains of collapse. A prime example of this cascade is the terrifying dieback of the Amazon rainforest. We've always thought of the Amazon as the lungs of the Earth, right? A vital carbon sink, safely absorbing massive amounts of our carbon emissions. But as the region dries and heats up, the whole ecosystem shifts. The forest actually flips from safely absorbing our carbon to dying off, rotting, and actively releasing dangerous amounts of carbon back into the air, which just accelerates the warming cycle even more. And simultaneously, we're facing what the reports define as an unmanaged extreme risk scenario, the weakening of the AMOC. That's the collapse of the Atlantic Ocean currents we mentioned just a minute ago. If this circulation stops, it would send devastating, uncontrollable shockwaves through global food and water systems. It would radically alter climates across entire continents, almost overnight. Which leads us to a pretty horrifying cliffhanger in this story. What actually happens when the grid fails and the food just stops moving? Modern civilization depends on this incredibly vast, intricate web of global interdependence. It's a web that perfectly conceals our underlying vulnerabilities. So, what happens to our modern life when these hidden, deeply interconnected systems finally snap?
Section 4. The societal unraveling. Well, if a catastrophe disrupts our power grids and our fragile, just-in-time food supply chains, dense urban centers basically turn into traps. This is exactly where ecology meets national security. When nature fails, when the water cycling stops and essential pollination collapses, that resulting scarcity drives a brutal societal unraveling. We are talking about rapid, severe political instability, a huge surge in organized crime as desperate populations just try to survive, and violent resource conflicts erupting all over the globe.
Section 5. The 2030s Countdown.
Humanity has started a terrifying timer. There are 9 critical planetary boundaries required to maintain Earth's stability, and we have already breached 7 of them. 7 out of 9. We are operating deep in the red zone here, pushing the fundamental systems of our planet way past their safe, historic limits.
But wait, here's what you really need to take away from this explainer. As dark and undeniably scary as this reality is, the sources heavily emphasize a critical pivot. This is not inevitable doom. The Earth's system still demonstrates incredible resilience. This data, it isn't some finalized prophecy of our end. Rather, it's a blaring, unavoidable call to action. We have the data. We clearly see the cracks. Now we just have to act before that final fracture happens.
The 2030s represent our crucial closing window. So, the question is, will we find the institutional and moral imagination required to stop this silent march? Will we redesign our systems, protect our ecosystems, and step back from the edge? Or will we just close our eyes, ignore the cracks, and simply let the ticking clock run out? The choice, at least for now, is still ours.